Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. And no, your eyes do not deceive you. I did in fact just watch Noughts Crosses season 2. Let's talk about it. So I want us to rewind back a couple of days ago when I was bored out of my mind. I was bored out of my mind. I need to iron some clothes and I was just looking for something to watch. I hopped on Netflix. I hopped on Disney Plus. I hopped on Apple TV Plus. I went on all of the streaming services and spent about half an hour trying to find something to watch. Boo! I was down bad, okay? Then I hopped onto BBC iPlayer and I was like, maybe I should start watching, I don't know, The Tourist, that show that people were talking about a few months ago. But then, lo and behold, I saw Noughts Crosses being promoted on BBC iPlayer. And I was like, that's unusual. That show pretty much came and went. Why are they promoting the series now? Well, it turns out there's a second season. What? What? Listen, I consider myself to be quite plugged in when it comes to TV show and movie announcements. Okay, I follow the tweets, okay, I follow the news, and so I'm pretty much aware of the upcoming projects that we're to be expecting for this year and even beyond. So it's very rare that I am entirely surprised by a TV show's release, let alone a TV show whose first season I actually watched and very much enjoyed. You know, the fact that I'm actually a fan of this show and I did not know that the second season was coming is mind-boggling. It makes absolutely no sense, but it speaks to the lack of promotion that this series got. It is just crazy how under the radar the second season of the show has been, and I do think it's for a reason, and we'll get into that later on when we talk about the series itself. But I just wanted to point out that it is really appalling and shocking just how this series seems to have just slipped by without BBC even promoting it, especially to fans who are actually, you know, highly anticipating the second season of the show. But before we get into my thoughts on the second season itself, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on the second season of Noughts Crosses. So first of all, for those of you guys who don't know, Noughts Crosses is a TV show adaptation of the famous and iconic books by Malorie Blackman. And if anyone here is going to take away one singular piece of information from this video, just 1 ounce of advice from this video, it would be please go read Malorie Blackman's books. please go read, don't walk, run to go read Malorie Blackman's books, because I'm telling you, even though there are parts of this series that I enjoy, there are also a lot of parts of this series that just drove me insane and I feel like do not do justice to Malorie Blackman's books. So if you haven't read them already, please go read them. Go read them because they are truly superb. Now, in my review of season 1 of Noughts Crosses, I already talked about how much these books meant to me growing up. This is one of the very few series that I was wholly invested in, and when I heard about the adaptation, I was really excited but also nervous to see how they would realize the incredibly rich and powerful and meaningful world and story that Malorie Blackman had built in the books. And so the stakes were really high for me, and I was really happy and impressed with what they were able to accomplish with season 1, and I did give it a lot of grace. I gave it a lot of grace. I already said in that review, I believe, that I was biased because these books are truly it, because they are. But having said that, even with all of the grace that I have and all of the favour that I have for Malorie Blackman's books, I cannot sit here and look you guys in the eyes and tell you that I was really happy with season 2 of the show. I'm so sorry, but like, what was this? What was this? And the first issue that I had was already a problem in season 1, but it appears to have gotten worse with season 2, and that is that the budget of this series does not allow for the world building, for the incredibly rich and diverse and new nuanced world that Malorie Blackman was able to convey on the page. You know, here we have a series that is backed by BBC and some other entities as well. I don't know what the inner workings are, but I mean, the case of BBC, they're never going to shell out millions upon millions of pounds per episode on these series. You know, the budget is going to be lower. And on top of this was already going to be considered a niche show because it's a series that is exploring the idea of this, you know, stand-in for Africa, which is called Africa in the show and in the books, and how this entity actually dominated and colonized Europe. It kind of flipped things around where the black people are in charge and the Noughts, who are actually the white people, are below them. And it explores all of these elements of discrimination and hatred and racism that we see in our real world, this time around through the lens of a world that has been flipped over, and seeing how the Noughts are treated in this society, in this fictional world, is supposed to echo how black people and disenfranchised people in our world are treated as well. So yeah, of course, by BBC standards, this is going to be a very niche show. This is going to be a show with limited appeal, and so it makes sense then through their perspective that they wouldn't want to pump too much money into this series, especially because, again, it's BBC, it's like publicly funded, so they were never going to shell out the big bucks for the show. But as I said in my review of season 1, I just wish more than anything that someone like Apple TV Plus or HBO Max would take this series on board and really do it justice, because whilst I feel there are some incredibly talented people working on the series as it is, and they really tried their best to realize Albion, to realize this world where Africa took over this version of the UK and make it Africanized, make it Afrocentric. You know, they really tried their best to do so, and there are some things that they incorporate that is really clever and really creative. But if we just had that HBO money, if we just had that Apple TV Plus money, we could do so much more. Because as I said in my review of the first season, once again, you know, when you consider the fact that Africa was supposed to have taken over Albion 700 years ago, you know, there are so many consequences and implications of that are not even touched upon in this series. If you really think about the logistics of Africa having taken over Europe 700 years ago, the world would be unrecognizable. There would be so many just cultural, you know, structural, institutional changes in this version of Europe that it would truly be unrecognizable to the Europe that we know today. And if we had something like a HBO or Apple TV Plus behind this series, you know, financially backing it, we could create a Game of Thrones level world, like an entirely different world that explores, you know, the themes of colonialism and flipping it on the other side. But at the same time, we would have the truly detailed and thought-provoking and rich world building that we see in Malorie Blackman's books. So in my dream scenario, if you could just join me in daydreaming a little bit, but in my dream world, this series would have a huge budget, and there would be all of these beautiful sets, perhaps done by the production designer on Black Panther, for instance, although there are plenty of talented people who could do this as well. You know, beautiful sets that are Afrocentric, creating a whole new version of Europe, and also taking into account all of the different African cultures that can be represented in this new version of Europe, and in particular the UK through Albion, and just really creating a whole new world from scratch. The technology would be different, you know, the legal system would be different, the cultures, the religion, everything would be different. And in fact, in my dream scenario, the central romance between Sephy and Callum would kind of be an afterthought. Like, they would kind of be an afterthought because there's so much else going on around them and so much to explore there that in reality they would be the least important part. But alas, as things stand, we do have their love story as a central focus in the series, and to be fair, in the books as well. And so that's what this second season focuses on. And unfortunately, the rest of this world, you know, building a beautiful environment that, you know, actually represents Africa's takeover of Albion, is kind of left in the wayside. And also, I will say, as much as I complained about the budget for season 1, it seems as though the budget for season 2 was like non-existent. Like literally non-existent. As I said, the problems that were in season 1 have been made worse in season 2 when it comes to the world building here, because the budget is even tighter and there are barely any signs of, you know, Africa having taken over Albion here. It mostly relies on the world building that was done in season 1, because in reality, if you stepped into this world and just watched season 2, you'd be really confused about, you know, when it was that Africa had taken over and what were the actual implications of this, because they're very scarcely seen on the show. But as it stands, we got the season that we got and this season was actually only 4 episodes as opposed to the 6 episodes of the previous season, which leads me to think that maybe they were like obliged contractually to make the second season, and that's why they just kind of pushed it out. But this season follows on from the events of season 1, where we saw Callum and Sephy running away after Callum finds out that Sephy is pregnant and breaks her up from this like prison that he himself had locked her into. It still boggles my mind that we're supposed to root for these guys when Callum was the one who had Sephy kidnapped in the first place by the LM. So he was the one that put her in danger, and he was about to attack her even before she told him that she was pregnant. So anyways, he wasn't looking too good in that light. But I will say, in the second season, when you see them trying to run away, I do think that Callum kind of redeemed himself as someone who really just was in love with Sephy and wanted to start a new life together in Muscovy, which is this world's version of Russia, I guess. Apparently there are some uprisings in Muscovy fighting against Africa, so that's an interesting element that, again, I wish we could explore further in my version of this series. Whatever. They're making plans to run away to Muscovy because they know that they won't be safe and in peace here in Albion with their child, with their unborn child. So they want to start a whole new life together, and it seems as though things would be easier for them over there. But that brings me to the second problem that I had with the second season, and that was this constant back and forth that we saw with Callum and Sephy being pulled here, there and everywhere. There would be moments where they're making plans to go to Muscovy and then they can't because there's an attack on the LM, and so they end up having to go to, I don't know, Callum's house, and then they go back to Sephy's house, and then they go back to Callum's house, and then back to escaping, and then back to, like, it seems as though they go around in circles all throughout these 4 episodes and there's no progress made. You know, there are oftentimes scenes where Sephy will literally be at her house and then she'll go see Callum for a little bit, and then that will send her back to her house again, and all of this back and forth just felt like we were very stagnant plot wise. And it must be said yet again that I do think it is a symptom of the budget and the restraints as a result of the limited budget, because they weren't able to really go to many places. There were very few kind of sets, I guess, and so they were stuck kind of rotating around all of them, and it felt that way. I could feel it this time around. And that, on top of the fact that the plot itself didn't feel as engaging, it didn't feel as exciting as we saw in season 1, also led to the feeling of like stagnation throughout this series. And that brings me to another issue that I had with this second season, was there were too many diversions from the books. I do not understand how you can have such incredible source material like Malorie Blackman's books and then just decide, F it, we're not going to do any of that. We're not like, I see what the books are doing, but we're not going to do any of that. I was shocked because these books are incredible, as I've already established, and they had so much great material to draw from, but instead they decided to go for the stalest version of this story, running around in circles before the series came to the inevitable conclusion. And it just did not make it as exciting and riveting as it could have been, especially considering how great those books are. I mean, spoilers for those of you who want to read the books and haven't yet already, spoilers, okay, but at the end of the first book, Callum dies. He ends up dying. I believe it's because he had a child with Sephy to begin with. Like, it's something that is very illegal in those books, and again, that's something that's not really established in the TV show because the stakes aren't quite as high here. There's this huge tragedy at the end of the first book when Callum ends up dying, and the rest of the books are about Sephy, you know, trying to live with her daughter, Callie Rose, and then we move on to Callie Rose's story. I feel like the series of events that play out in the first book could have been tackled in the first season, and the first season could have ended with Callum's death as opposed to dragging it out in 2 seasons where the second season felt like it was just spinning its wheels. But as it stands, the death was really, really sad. Oh, it was so upsetting to see Callum be executed. I knew it was coming, but I was like, they've changed so much about the books here already. Maybe they'll change this as well. But like, no, that's the whole purpose of the first book, is Callum's death. So it's a very poignant, very upsetting moment. I don't think they did it quite as much justice as the books did, again, because the series felt like it was spinning its wheels a little bit. But when that moment came, it was really emotionally impactful. It really did hit hard, especially when you have Callum, you know, recording these messages to his unborn child. Like, it was really heartbreaking to see him ultimately be murdered. And also that build up that they had, and I will say that's one thing that they did very well. The build up that they had, where each and every time there was some progress, you thought he would get out of it. Like, each and every time, like, for instance, you know, you have the Empress getting involved and she says, no, don't kill him. And then you have Kamal going against the Empress. Like, each and every time we had hope and it was stolen from us. And then in the end, he ends up dying and you're just left in tears, in absolute tears. You're left to do nothing but cry. And I will also say that this speaks to Jack Rowan's portrayal of Callum. I actually think he's the perfect Callum. I think he's perfect casting for Callum, truly. I think he sold the scenes where he was supposed to be in love with Sephy, the passion that he had to try and establish a whole new life for themselves and their little family. I think he sold it completely. Like, he was really a shining star in this series, and I was really heartbroken when he died, mostly because of his portrayal of the character. But this unfortunately leads me to another issue that I had with the second season, and I hate to say this. Oh, I don't want to say this. I really don't want to say this. But I do think that Masali Baduza, who portrays Sephy, she wasn't giving me everything that I need. I needed her to give me more. I wanted to feel the passion that she had for Callum, because I felt the other way around. Like, I felt Callum's passion for Sephy and his love for her, but there were moments where horrific things were happening and sis was not reacting the way that I personally thought that she needed to react. I needed her to give 150% for this role, to really sell this connection that the two have, because this is the central focus, once again, to this entire story. Now, like I said, in my ideal version, they would just be a side story. They would just be a B storyline to the A storyline of Africa colonizing Europe. But as it stands, they're an A storyline. So I need to see passion. I need to see fire coming out from these two. And throughout this series, and in fact in this first season as well, I just felt it coming from Callum. I wasn't feeling enough from Sephy. So I just have to point it out. I'm so sorry, sis. She's not going to see this. I'm so sorry. But I just had to point it out. Like, I needed more from her. And speaking of passion, another bright side to this series was Patterson Joseph. He is evil. He was evil. He portrayed Sephy's father, Kamal. That man was relentless. He was so evil, but it's exactly who he needed to be, because that man, he just did everything that he could to destroy the McGregors. It was like heartbreaking. Can you imagine? The Empress has said to let him go. Callum was supposed to be released by the Empress's words, by her command, and Kamal ignored it completely. He was like, nah, I've got a vendetta against this guy. He dared to get my daughter pregnant. Nah, I'm gonna have him executed. Man's was crazy. He was literally insane. So yeah, I have no choice but to applaud Patterson Joseph's performance. Like I literally have no choice but to give him a round of applause, because he was like, that was the passion that I was after. Although in his case, it was just true hatred. It was putrid hatred for all the Noughts, and in particular for the McGregors. And then on the flip side of this rivalry, you had Josh Dillon portraying Jude, Callum's brother, and he was also great. I feel like these two, the rivalry between these two was more passionate than the romance between Callum and Sephy. Again, that's an issue because they're supposed to be the A storyline, but I do think that Jude made for a really great character. I will say though, this is yet another diversion from the books, okay? They tried to have him have a love interest this season, and I think that was a big mistake. Not because him having a love interest is a problem, but because his love story in Knife's Edge is one of the, it's one of the most shocking stories, heartbreaking stories about just ingrained hatred and racism and discrimination, and just, it's just, you have to read Knife's Edge. The story there, again, spoilers for those of you who don't want to hear anything about the books, the story there is that Jude, who is so much more hateful towards the Crosses in the books, he falls in love with a Cross who I believe was a nurse. I read these like 10 years ago. She was a nurse who like helped him and nursed him back to health, just like Cara does in season 2, but he slowly but surely ends up falling in love with her, and he hates himself for it. Like, he hates the fact that he's fallen for a Cross, because he is like really militant in the books and he's against all of them, and he actually ends up killing her. Yes. So you see, the tone is different. You see, like, I'm telling you, the books are just so much more hardcore when it comes to the exploration of discrimination and like racism in so many ways. I feel like this series just, like, you know, it deals with some of it, okay, and there's definitely some really interesting themes explored. For instance, the LM, I guess, being the Noughts version of the Black Panthers. Like, they're very militant. It seems wrong to even say that, I'm so sorry, but they're very militant and they're standing up for their rights and injustices that they see in their society. And then on the flip side, you have the Crosses, you know, militant division that are essentially like, you know, right-wing supremacists. So there is some interesting commentary here in season 2, but with the books, it's just so much more hardcore. Like, it goes there. So whilst there is some great commentary in season 2, I do think that Jude storyline was wasted. Like, it just ended up being a half-hearted love story between the two characters who barely had any chemistry, if I'm being honest. But it could have been it could have been completely different, and it would have rocked all of our worlds, quite frankly. And I also wanted to touch on some of the tertiary characters. First of all, we have Lekan and Minerva. So in the case of Lekan, he's become a lieutenant for the Prime Minister now, Kamal. And yeah, again, he's very militant. He's supposed to represent someone who's like very right-wing, and he's kind of been brainwashed by that militia. He believes in their message, you know, conserving their culture and all of that. It's the rhetoric that we hear all the time from right-wing militias. This is the clever commentary that I wish was at the forefront of this story, because it is so important, and it's so wild to see a black man be a part of this discussion, because the roles are reversed, and hopefully white majority audiences can see how frightening and messed up this rhetoric can be when it's directed towards minorities. And then in the case of Minerva, she was barely a footnote in the second season, honestly, and she wasn't given much of a character arc to speak of. She reconciles with her sister after she finds out that Sephy is pregnant, and she sides with her, which is nice, but that storyline isn't really given much meat. Like, it's not really given much significance. It just sort of happens because it's convenient for it to, and I suppose they're just trying to wrap things up for the end of season 2, which I suspect would be the last season of the show. So Minerva as a character was a little bit disappointing. I am glad though that at the end she finally stood up for herself and realized that she was always a second choice to Lekan. You know, he was even flirting with someone else whilst they were on their date to their like right-wing rally. So yeah, he just ain't it. Like, he ain't it for her. I think she mostly wanted him because he wanted her sister and she was just chasing after him. And then when he finally graced her with his presence, you know, she just kind of fell putty in his hands. But I'm glad she woke out of that reverie and realized her self-worth. And then finally we have the mothers. We have Helen Baxendale portraying Meggie, who's Callum and Jude's mother. She's amazing. I really love her. She's just so kind-hearted and you feel empathy towards her because of the plight of her family. Yeah, I think she is another shining star in this series. She's so amazing. I wish she was a little bit more ruthless when it came to protecting her family though. She seemed quite, you know, open to Sephy and to Sephy's family even after everything that they had done to her family. But I wish she was a little bit more self-serving, especially when it came to protecting Callum from the literal death penalty. Because here's the thing, she's standing there protesting alongside Jasmine, who's literally Kamal's wife. Like, to me, it's like, can't you speak to your husband and stop this madness? Like, why aren't you trying to speak to your husband and stop him from literally killing my son? It's just wild to me that she would even speak to Jasmine in a civilized manner. In my mind, it would just be throwing hands. Like, in my if it was me, like like all bets are off. I would be pissed as hell. So overall, despite the fact that my prayers and hopes and wishes were answered and I was in fact given a second season to Noughts and Crosses, ultimately when I watched the series I was a little bit disappointed. I do feel like that the source material is just so rich and has such intelligent and creative storytelling that the series really could have benefited from a bigger budget and just from, you know, a more open mindset when it came to exploring these books and this story in order to do it justice. But in reality we got pretty much the Cliff Notes version of the story with a tiny budget that couldn't really do justice to the world building that we see in the books. And that was already a problem in season 1, but it was felt even more so in season 2, which seemed to just come and go with nothing but a whisper. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving season 2 of Noughts and Crosses a 6 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on season 2 of Noughts and Crosses, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.